Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Mukesh's Tech Space. For those of you that are watching my video for the first time, I post video tutorials on AWS Lightsail, WordPress hosting and configuration, and videos on other easy to set up and use web hosting tools and services. I also have some videos on WordPress tips and tricks, mostly for beginners. So if you are interested in this type of content, please consider subscribing to my channel and go back and check out all my videos that I've done over the past year or so. I've received many comments and emails with the question on upgrading the PHP version on AWS WordPress installs. I also looked on Google and found this to be a common issue. So in this video, I'll try to show you how you can upgrade PHP with the Lightsail instances you have. This is going to be a bit of an involved process, and I will talk about some of the limitations of Lightsail for any future installs that you may do. You could consider or take those into consideration. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so typically if you're setting up a WordPress site on Lightsail, you're using the Lightsail blueprints to create your WordPress instance. So if you click on Create Instance, you'll come down here where you select a blueprint. You have the option of selecting a standalone WordPress single site blueprint or the multi-site blueprint. Now in AWS, the blueprints are provided by a company called Bitnami. And Bitnami makes lots of images for various open source software. Basically, an image is a ready-to-install software stack that's configured to work together efficiently for the software you want to run. So they have a WordPress image that they have configured the Linux configuration, the Apache web server, MySQL database, and PHP, all of that configured and ready to go. So all you have to do is do a one-click install. Now, with that comes with a limitation. Then at that point, you're running a Bitnami image that was configured by them with the specific versions that they set up when you set up the install. So Bitnami is pretty good on updating their images with latest versions of those technology stacks, those software stacks, and making that available for anyone that wants to create brand new images. Then you could use that latest version. However, the limitation with us in Lightsail is that we have to then rely on AWS to update these versions of the blueprints that are available for us to choose. So if right now we see WordPress version 5.6 and 5.60, so that means that Lightsail has updated these installs with the latest versions of the Bitnami images. But if they haven't, then any new instances that you create will still be using whatever version AWS has certified. So let's go ahead and take a look here. I'll create a instance, sample instance for us to check out. And that will take a couple of minutes, so I'll be right back when it's ready for us to look at. Okay, so the instance is ready. So let's go ahead and click on the SSH button to log into the server, and on the command prompt, if I type in php-v, I'll get the version of PHP, and the version at this time is PHP 7.4. So Bitnami has updated their WordPress image to PHP 7.4, and AWS has updated the list of blueprints to use that latest version. You'll also notice that Bitnami is now using WordPress version 5.6, which I believe at the time of this recording is the latest version of WordPress. So many of you that have created a Bitnami-based WordPress site on Lightsail maybe 6 months ago or a year ago, you might not have this latest version, obviously. You might have PHP version 7.0 or 7.2. And so you want to upgrade that to the supported version, which is 7.4. Now, how would you do that? Bitnami recommends you create a brand new instance in Lightsail with their latest blueprint, and then you migrate your WordPress site from your old instance to that new Bitnami instance. And you would do that using a migration plugin, such as All-in-One Migration Plugin, or Duplicator is another plugin. And there are many plugins out there to basically export your site from one instance and import it into another instance. So you would use that to migrate your site. Now, one little caveat with that process is that if you are on an older version of WordPress, then you will have to upgrade your site as well to the latest version of WordPress, which is 5.6, again, at the time of this recording. And you may not be ready to do that. So you would be in a little bit of a limitation there, or a problem there, that once you upgrade or once you migrate over your WordPress site to this new instance, you'll have to upgrade WordPress, your database, as well as update any of the plugins that need to be updated. And if some of the plugins that you're using aren't ready for version 5.6, then you have a problem. So this approach is good if you have a very simple site, you don't have a lot of plugins, and you know that those plugins are supported on the latest version of WordPress. So you could use this approach of just creating a new Bitnami instance, migrating your WordPress site using the all-in-one plugin or any other plugin, exporting it from the old instance, importing it into this newly created Bitnami instance, and then changing the IP address, detaching the static IP from the old instance and attaching it to the new instance, and you're all good to go. But if you have a bit of a complicated site or a more complex website with a lot of plugins, and you don't want to upgrade to the latest version of WordPress just yet without a lot of changes, then you have a problem with this process. So for that, we're going to walk through a different set of steps to basically create our own version of the entire technology stack to run WordPress. And then we can migrate over your site as is with the old version that you already have. And I will show you how to do that. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do with the second option is create an instance. We're going to come over here. We're going to pick Linux, Unix as our platform. And then we're going to click on OS only. And then here we're going to pick Ubuntu 18.04 as our version of Linux. And then come down here and you'll want to pick the instance plan that is appropriate for your website. For our tutorial, I'll pick the first one. And then we'll just give it a name and then create an instance. And this will take a couple of minutes, so I'll be right back once that instance is available and online. Okay, our instance is up and running. So the next thing we'll do is click on your instance name, and then attach a static IP address. So attach a static IP. I have one already here, so I will attach that. There we go. And then while we're on this page, we'll go ahead and add the firewall port for HTTPS. Go ahead and take care of that. Okay, so now let's SSH into the server to run our next set of commands. So I'm going to again use my Bitvise SSH Client. This is the one that I use for SSH purposes and for also SFTP purposes. So type in the IP address. Your username for this server is Ubuntu. And then you'll want to pick the SSH key, the public key that you can get from the account of your Lightsail dashboard. So once you have your SSH client set up, go ahead and log in. And you'll be logged into your server using SSH as the user Ubuntu. So the first thing we're going to do is update the apt-get utilities before we make any software installation. So to run that, type in sudo apt-get update. And as usual, I'll have all of these commands on a blog post on our companion website, webhostingforbeginners.net. So check that out there to get all the commands and the steps that we're running through today in this tutorial. So once that's done, run sudo apt-get upgrade. say yes. And this will take a couple of minutes, so let it run through its process. It will prompt us, or should prompt us for a couple of things, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Here's the first one. It's saying that it wants to restart during these package upgrades. So should we let it restart? Go ahead and say yes to this. And then the second one will be about some local configuration changes that we should keep. Okay, so this is the OpenSSH server configuration, and it's asking us that there is a new version of the configuration file, but a version installed currently has been modified. So I don't know if AWS modifies the OpenSSH server. I'm sure it does, so I don't want to touch that. So the option that we'll pick here is keep the local version, and then hit OK, and it should finish up the installation here in a few seconds. All right, so now the next command is to install a package utility. This is a package manager, I guess, in a way. It's a tool that can install a bunch of grouped items all together without having you to install them manually. So what we'll do is type in the command sudo apt get install, and the name of the utility is Tasksel. And what this is doing, what this will allow us to do is install the entire technology stack that's needed to run WordPress all in one shot. So it's kind of like a one-click. Instead of manually installing Apache, MySQL, PHP, what this will do is install the entire stack. To run the command, once it's installed, you would type in sudo tasksel install lamp server. So here you see it's going to run through all of the installations without having us to do them individually. If you prefer, you can do them individually. There are a lot of tutorials out there that can walk you through individually installing them, but I prefer this route. Again, our channel is all about trying to simplify or install things in a more efficient way. So this is a package that I found and it works pretty well. Okay, and it's done. So now what we want to do is verify those technology stack items and components were installed correctly. So the first thing we can do is test if Apache is installed now on the server. So we can go to this IP address in a browser window, and we should see the Apache Ubuntu default page, which means that our Apache server is serving files. Second item we want to test is the MySQL database, whether that was installed or not. So to do that, let's just try to log into MySQL. And here we go. MySQL is installed, and perfect. MySQL version 5.7. Let's go ahead and quit out of that. Let's also see what version of PHP is installed on the server now. So let's do php-v. And you'll see here it's PHP version 7.2.24. So we are using an older version of PHP. So with Ubuntu 18.04, PHP 7.2 is installed by default. If we were to select the Ubuntu 20.07, I think it is, that will have PHP 7.4 installed by default. So you could go with running all of these commands on that Ubuntu server. The only reason I picked this version is so that I could show you how to upgrade PHP 7.2 to 7.4. Okay, and so we see PHP version 7.2 installed. Let's also verify the PHP module that's configured with Apache. So to test that, we will go to root directory, var www html. This is the Apache root directory. We will create a simple PHP file. Inside this file, we will print out PHP info, close that, and let's save the file. So let's load this up in the browser, index.php, and you'll see that the version 7.2 is installed. Next, we'll open up the firewall ports for Apache. So to do that, type in sudo ufw allow in Apache full, and that will update the rules on the server. And let's see, we can also verify, again, just make sure that the server is still responding after we made those firewall changes. So the next step we'll do is when you install MySQL, it installs a script to secure the MySQL server. So let's run that server, the secure script. So type in sudo MySQL secure installation. And the first thing that it's going to prompt us is whether to install a validation, password validation plugin. Now, it's a good idea to have this. However, once you do install this plugin, then MySQL will ensure that any passwords that are created for MySQL are always meeting certain guidelines. And if you are installing software like php.ini and some other software on here, then those may not install correctly, or they may conflict because they may install using a simple password, and MySQL will reject that. So my suggestion is to just say no to this screen here and move forward for the next prompt. So let's say no here. Now it will ask us to set up a new password for MySQL. So let's go ahead and set that up. This is the root password, by the way. Okay. And then on this prompt, remove anonymous users, we'll say yes. Disallow root login remotely. That is important, so we will say yes. We will remove the test database and access to it. Yes. And then reload table privileges. We'll go ahead and say yes to that. And all done. Well, so with this little script, your MySQL server is a lot more secure than the default installation. So the next step we'll do now is upgrade PHP from 7.2 to 7.4, and we will configure Apache then to load and use 7.4. So again, let's see our PHP version. We just saw that a few seconds ago, and it is still version 7.2 on this server. So first step is to update our apt-get manager, package manager. Then we will run the command sudo apt install software properties common. And this will take a couple of minutes to update. All right. Then the next step is to add to the package manager repository the PHP repo. So we'll add apt repository. And then it'll ask us if we want to continue. Hit enter. And we'll do apt-get update one more time. And now we install PHP 7.4. And if you're watching this video when there's a new version of PHP, maybe PHP 7.8 or PHP 8, likely you'll follow these same steps, except replace the 7.4 with the latest version of PHP that you want to install. Enter. Okay, and let's verify that now the system recognizes PHP 7.4. There we go. So 7.4.13 is the latest build. When we made a test index.php file that printed out the PHP version using our PHP info command. If you look here, it still recognizes PHP 7.2. So in parallel, 7.2 is still installed. We just installed 7.4 side by side, and only the system now recognizes PHP 7.4. We still need to now configure Apache to recognize and load PHP 7.4. So that's what we'll do next. So the next step here is to install all the various PHP modules and packages and extensions that are needed to run WordPress. So to do that, I will copy this command. And again, these commands will be available in the accompanying blog post on webhostingforbeginners.net. So we'll paste this. This will install PHP common module, MySQL, so that we can connect to MySQL from PHP. It will also install several other utilities like PHP curl, mbstring, memcache, zip, XML, JSON, MySQLi, ImageMagick, zip, FPM. So all of these are needed for WordPress to run one way or the other. So we'll install all of these. So the next step will be to disable PHP 7.2 and enable PHP 7.4 for Apache. So let's run this command to first disable PHP, sudo a2 dismod PHP 7.2, and then we will enable mod PHP 7.4, and then we will also enable PHP 7.4 FPM for Apache. So run these commands. And sudo a2 Okay, so as you type these commands, it will tell you that it needs to restart Apache, it needs to reload Apache. Some of these notices that you'll see when you're running this on your own server. And no need to run these just yet. We'll finish up all the various configurations and then do that restart and reload at the end. So the next thing we'll do is configure PHP to run better for WordPress. So let's go ahead and configure the PHP.ini. Okay, so there are several configuration items that we need to either make sure that they're enabled or enable them if they're not, and then some settings that are optimal for the WordPress software. So the first thing is file uploads. We want to make sure that that's on. The second one is allow URL fopen. Make sure that that's enabled. So that is. We also want to make sure short open tag is turned on. Here I see that it's not, so let's go ahead and uncomment that and turn that on. The next thing we want to make sure is the memory limit. So the memory limit here is 128. You would want to change that based on your server spec. So if you have a 2 gig server, you can change that to be a little bit higher. You don't want it all the way up to 2 gigs, but you could do a 1.5 gig or 1 gig memory limit. If you have a 4 gig server, you can change it accordingly. I have, this server is a 512 megabyte, so I will just set it to 256. The next item is CGI fix, path info. It's disabled, but we want to enable that and set this to 0. And then the upload max file size. So this is an important one because this will, this property enables you to upload larger files into WordPress in the admin dashboard. So we want to set this to something very high. Again, set this to something that's based on your needs, but I will just, for now, just say 200 megabytes. Next one is max execution time. Go there, max execution time. And we will put this to 360. The date and time zone. Next item is date time zone. It's commented out, but we want to enable that. And this should be the time zone for where you are. And so change that accordingly. But for me, it's America, Chicago, so which is Central Time. The next one is error log. So uncomment that, and we will give it the value of var log php error log. Next one will be the error reporting. Comment this and add this error reporting, which is good for WordPress. There we go. And then finally, max input time. Let's uncomment that and let's set that to 60. Okay, so save these changes, and now we will restart and reload Apache. So let's run the restart command for Apache. There we go, and then let's also reload PHP. All right. Now let's verify what Apache sees, which version of PHP Apache is connected to. So if I refresh that index.php now, it should now show 7.4. So now Apache is connected to 7.4. The next step will be to continue configuring the PHP items. So let's go ahead and make a directory for our log file. And then change the owner to give it to the Apache web server user. Okay, and then we'll have to restart Apache one more time. Okay, so now we need to set up permissions for our www HTML, our public directory. So we'll run these commands. So we need Apache to be the owner of that. We'll also find any existing files or directories that need to be updated. Permissions need to be updated. Okay. And next we'll give our user Ubuntu read-write permissions so that if you are SSH'd in and you want to modify PHP files, or if you want to upload something to that directory, you can. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I copied these commands. Now we should be able to begin the setup of WordPress. So we'll go ahead and get the latest version of WordPress here, but let me show you how to get the version of WordPress that you currently have on your existing server. So if you go over to WordPress.org, you can click on Get WordPress. So the latest version is 5.6. However, if you wanted a different version, you would go to all releases and you'll see all the various releases of WordPress. So if you wanted, for example, if your current site is running on 5.2, then you'll want to come here and pick up this 5.2 URL. So you'll copy this URL. And if you wanted the latest one, you could just come up here and copy this zip file. So this is how we're going to download WordPress onto the server. So let's go up here, and the command to run is wget, and then the path to the zip file. So if you'll see here, this zip file, I'll just move my camera just slightly. You see at the bottom of the browser, the zip file is WordPress-5.6.zip. However, you could get a simpler path. If you wanted the latest, it would be wordpress.org/latest.zip. But if you wanted a specific release of WordPress, then you would come down here and you would just hover over this and you say, it says wordpress.org/WordPress-5.3.6. So this is 5.3.6. So if you wanted that version. For our tutorial here, we will use the latest version. So we'll just type in, or let's go ahead and copy from the website. So I'm going to copy this URL, copy link, go back to my terminal, paste it. So it's wordpress.org latest.zip, and we'll bring it down into our HTML directory. And now we have the latest download of WordPress. Let's unzip it. Build unzip. There we go. And then WordPress is now unzipped into a directory called WordPress. You could keep that if you wish. I will rename that to the domain name that I plan to use for this WordPress site. So that could be your existing domain, or it could be any other directory. But if you tie it to a domain name, it's just easier to identify. So that's what we'll do next, is rename that directory to my domain name. And the sample domain name I'm using here is mukesh.me. So we will rename it. And then we need to give ownership to Apache. Go. Okay, so next we'll need to set up the Apache virtual host for our website. So to do that, we'll need to create a configuration file. So I'm going to copy and paste this configuration file command here. And what you'll see here is that I'm creating a mukesh.me.conf. So this should be replaced with your website's domain name, and it should also match the directory that if you moved your directory or renamed your directory, the WordPress directory, to your domain name, then all of these should match. So if you said www.yourdomain.com, then this should be www.yourdomain.com.conf. So just make sure that that matches all the way through, and then hit enter. You will come up with a file editor, and we will copy this configuration here. Now within this configuration, what you'll want to replace is the server admin, so give it an email address here. You'll also want to replace the server name with your domain name. So if your domain name is www.yourdomain.com, then here you will go yourdomain.com, and then the server alias will be www.yourdomain.com. And then the document root will be the path where the WordPress directory that we just created and have the WordPress files in. So again, that should be your domain directory. So mukesh.me for me, or yourdomain.com. So just make sure you update these after you paste it. Final 2 lines to update, or 3 lines to update, is the error log, where you want the error log to be saved. Again, that should be just replace this mukesh.me with your domain. And then same thing here, mukesh.me with your domain. And then the directory tag, you'll replace this mukesh.me with your domain as well. So once you have made those changes, save the file. And then what we'll do is this configuration now needs to be combined into Apache. So we'll run this command. This will enable this website within the Apache configuration. And then we'll reload Apache to activate it. Run this command, and we can go ahead and test if our configuration is working now. So sudo apache 2ctl config test. Syntax is okay, so far we have not made any mistakes. Now the next step in the WordPress installation process is to set up our WordPress database. So we'll log into MySQL. The root password that we set up when we ran that configuration script. We will create database, WPDB. Again, this is the database name that I chose. You should, you can change this or use a different database name at this point here. We need to create a user for our WordPress database. I'm just going to use WP user, but you can pick something different. And then the password. And I will copy this password. You should definitely not use this password as it's now on our blog post. But use a strong password nonetheless. And then we'll grant this user all privileges to the database. Spelled. That's why I like to copy and paste it, but oh well. Okay. So now we have our database created, our user created, and the necessary privileges assigned to the user for that database. So we'll quit out of MySQL. So as I was editing the video tutorial, I realized that the last few steps I could have done a little bit differently based on our use case of migrating an existing site over to this new server that we are building. So I will re-record those last few steps, making the changes necessary to accommodate that that use case. So let's get started. We left off with updating or creating a database for our WordPress site. The next thing what we'll do is go to our existing WordPress dashboard and install the migration plugin, and we can export the data from the existing site to get it ready for the new site. So what I'll do here is I do have a sample WordPress website already here. So what I'm going to do is go to this IP address and I will log in, and you could do this for your existing website. Log into the WP admin and install the all-in-one WP migration plugin. So you would just go to plugins, add new, search for all-in-one, and the migration plugin should be in the first few results. So you'll see this, install it, and then activate it. Here I have an update, so let me go ahead and update the plugin. There we go. So then it should create a menu item on your admin dashboard. Click on all-in-one WP migration, click on export, and here what you'll do is you have some options here to, if some of the items you do not want to bring over to your new server, but let's assume we want to bring everything. So we will not check any of these boxes. We'll hit export, and then we'll click on file. And then what this will do is compile all your data, including your content, WordPress content, as well as all your files, and zip it, convert it, create a zip out of it, and allow you to download that. So here we go, download. So what you want to do is just save that into a folder on your computer, and we will use that a little bit later in the steps. So close out of this, and we will go ahead and close this. Now, the next thing is, as I mentioned, we have created our MySQL database and have it ready. What we want to do is finish the WordPress installation. So we need to be able to get to the WordPress installation. You won't be able to get to it just by typing the IP address because it is a virtual host. So if you just type in the IP address of your new server, you will see the Apache Ubuntu default page. So what we have to do is get to it via the domain name that we use to configure the virtual host. And for me, that was mukesh.me. For you, it will be your domain name that you are already using for your existing site. So you can't use that just yet. So to get around that, what we will do is update our host file on our laptop or on our computer, on our Windows computer, and we will manually insert the DNS entry on our computer so that just for us, we can reach an IP address or the new server with that domain name. So to do that, and again, this is for Windows only. So if you are on a Mac or Linux or another operating system, then these steps will not be applicable to you. If you just do a Google and see how you can update the host file for your operating system, then you would want to do the same steps for your operating system. But if you have Windows, then just follow these steps. So hit your Windows key, type in CMD, and as you start typing, you'll start to see the command prompt app be visible in the start menu. So all you have to do is right-click on that and run as administrator. And then it will prompt you, the user account control will prompt you to see if you wanted to do this, say yes. And on the command prompt window, since you're opening it as an administrator, you should already be in the Windows System 32 folder. If you're not, just go to the Windows System 32 folder. Then inside here, go to CD drivers, etc. And then inside here, there's a file called hosts. And so you want to modify that. So let's hit Notepad hosts, and that should open up the file in Windows Notepad. So here, this is a file where you can override DNS changes temporarily, and this is a good way to point a domain name to an IP address if you don't want to do it globally for everybody and you just want to test something out. So I use this a lot. So what I would do here is create an entry. You start off by putting in the IP address of your new server and then your domain name. So put a space between those two and then put your domain name. For me in this tutorial, it's mukesh.me, but you could put yourdomain.com. So you go ahead and make that entry and save the file. Then when you come back to the browser and you type in your domain name, you should be able to get to the WordPress installation wizard. So that's what we see here. So what we're going to do is just follow this process of setting up our WordPress website. We need a database name, so that was WPDB. Username I set up was WP user. These would be whatever you set up when you created your WordPress database. And then the password is, for me, it's this long secure password. You should have your own long, very secure password. Database host is localhost, and the table prefix, if you want to change that. If you've seen one of my videos around securing WordPress, I do recommend changing the table prefix. It may or may not deter any hacking attempts, but it's always good to do that. And then run the installation. Now here, give your site a title. This will all be erased, so you could just give it whatever you want. This will be erased because we will do the import of our migrated site. So whatever you have set up over there is what gets applied here. Even the username will be temporary as well. So let's go ahead and type this information to get it set up, and we will install WordPress. Okay, so WordPress is installed. We do need to log in and just make sure everything is good. You will need that plugin, the WP All-in-One Migration plugin. So we will add that here in a couple of minutes. But next we will do is generate the SSL certificate for our domain. We need that as well. So let's generate the way we'll generate the SSL certificate is using a command line utility called CertBot. CertBot is a tool that will connect to the Let's Encrypt service, generate your SSL, and will also help you automatically renew your SSL certificate when it starts to expire, which is 90 days. So we will install this, and because your current domain name is still pointing to your old website, your old IP address, we won't be able to do the normal way of generating the certificate using this CertBot tool. That's what I was doing in my original video that I created. I was using a different way of generating the certificate, but I realized that that would not work for our use case of migrating a site, because our domain is still pointing to the live site, which is on an old server, which would be on the Bitnami server. So the CertBot utility we're going to use is now going to generate the certificate using a different method called DNS challenge. So what it does is it needs to verify that you own the domain name that you're requesting a certificate for. And so the normal method is just by connecting to your IP address, installing a file, and verifying that that file exists there, and it will generate a certificate for you. We can't do that here, so we will use the DNS method. In the DNS method, we will be given a random value to be inserted into our DNS records as a CNAME record, and it will verify that way that we own the domain name and generate the certificate for us and install it. So let's go ahead and walk through those steps. So install CertBot. All right, CertBot is installed. The next command is a Python script that we need for doing the domain-based challenge, DNS-based challenge. So let's run this command. That should have downloaded a file called acmednsauth.py, pi for Python. Let's give it the proper permissions, and then we need to modify this file. So I open it up in a VI editor, and on the first line, we need to just add Python 3 to the script and save it. Again, all these commands will be on our blog post on webhostingforbeginners.net, so you can just copy and paste all of these commands if you're running through this tutorial. So the next thing we'll do is generate our certificate. So before we do that, I think we need to move this script. So we're going to move the Python script to the etc/Let's Encrypt folder. So that's that command. And then we will run the command to generate our certificate. So show you that command. Okay. So the command is sudo certbot cert only, and we're going to do a manual check. We also will do a manual authorization. So these two keys are needed, or parameters. And then this is the script that we just modified that we will run. And then we will tell it that we want the DNS challenge. And then this debug challenges parameter basically tells it to wait for us to hit the enter key, or us to tell it to when it's time to check for the DNS validation, because that will give us time to go to our DNS provider, update the DNS, and come back here to tell it that we're ready for it to validate our DNS. And that could be, based on your DNS provider, it could be, 5 minutes to maybe a couple of hours before the DNS is updated. So that's why we want to put this flag in here, or this parameter, so that it prompts us when it's ready to, it asks for our permission when it's ready to do the validation. And then followed by -D and then the domain names that we want to generate the certificate for. So this is the command complete to install. So we will go ahead and hit this. And then it needs an email address. And then we'll ask you for your terms of service agreement. So read the terms of service and agree. And then we'll ask you for an option to share your email address to the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I'll say no. And then it says that the IP of this machine will be publicly logged. Sure, okay with that. Okay, and so then it outputs our CNAME records that we need to insert into our DNS at our DNS registrar to be able to validate that we own this domain. And then because we use that debug challenges flag, it asks us to press enter to continue. So we won't continue until we've done our DNS changes. So let me go to my DNS registrar and I'll be right back. All right, so I've logged into my DNS provider, which is my domain registrar. But the process should be similar. If not, you could just look up the help documentation for your DNS provider to see how you can add CNAME records to your DNS. So what we will do here is come in here and add our CNAME records. So let's go back to the command prompt. And it says, please add the following CNAME record. So we'll copy this front part, paste it. I don't need the end period. And then the value will be this right here. Paste that, and then add the record. I don't need the last period. There we go. And then we also need to add one for www base domain. So let's take that one, that. Take the value here, and then paste that, and then we'll add the record here as well. So the two CNAME records have been added. Again, some DNS registrars take a little bit longer to propagate this. Always do make sure when you're making these type of changes, the TTL value, if you're allowed to modify that, make that 300. So it's a bit quicker in refreshing or propagating these DNS changes out on the internet. So let's go ahead and try it. We will go back to our command prompt and it's waiting us to hit enter. So let's go ahead and try that. Hit enter. And now it's going to do, hopefully, validation. And if it found our CNAME records, then it's going to generate the and it already has. It's going to generate the certificates and install it on our server. So, and you should see a note like this: congratulations, your certificate have been saved. So our next step in the process will be to import our website that we exported from your old website. So I do need to install. Let's go ahead and install the all-in-one plugin. Need to go up here, add all-in-one migration. Perfect. Let's install this. Okay, we have it. Click on import, import file. Here is our file. And then this will perform all the necessary steps to import all your data as well as files. So let's click on proceed. And if everything went correctly, it says your site has been imported successfully. And then we need to do a couple of options right here, or one option, which is save the permalink structure. So click on that. and it will ask us to log in. See, since I migrated, I should be now using the old username and password to here, and then save the permanent links and hit save changes. And now our import should be complete. Our SSL, we haven't tested that, so let's go ahead and see if the SSL works. And there we go, SSL is working. The site is on our newly generated SSL certificate. If you try to log into WP admin, it will ask you for your username and password again. Let's see, what are we going to do next? So once we have all of this done, what you should do next is remove the manual entry that we made to the host file. Remove that entry and then change the DNS records to point to this new IP address. So if you go back to your command prompt and open up the Notepad host file. So with Notepad, we'll open up the host file. You'll want to go ahead and remove the manual entry that you made and then save that file. For me, this will continue to work because again, my DNS entries are already made. Let me show you that real quick. So right here, you'll see that mukesh.me, my domain, www.mukesh.me, both of them are pointing to my IP address. So for you, this would have been pointing to your existing Lightsail server. So you just need to come into your DNS records, update those A records, and point them to the new IP address, and then you should be able to point or go to your browser, load up your site, and it should be pointed to the new site. Now, again, the propagation time for the DNS may be different for you, so it could take anywhere from a few minutes to a couple of hours. So you would just continue to check and make sure that you are now hitting the new site. You can do that using on the command prompt, just do ping mukesh.me or your domain name, and it should tell you whether you're still pointing to the old IP or the new IP. So I think that's it for this tutorial. It has been a pretty long tutorial. Again, if you run into any issues or have any questions, please put them down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. If you have a better way or if you found any mistakes in my process, let me know as well, and let others know as well, and so we can update that. If you found this video useful, tutorial useful, don't forget to share it, like the video, and also if you haven't subscribed, subscribe to my channel. I do have some links down in the description that point to some Amazon affiliates, so if you are interested in some of those items, please use those links. I will put some information at the end of this video for anything else that I may want to let you know about. So until the next video, you guys have a happy new year and take care.